Hello, and welcome to another session of Birth Talk. If you remember, my guest Susan was here talking about how to be an advocate for women in labor, and we had another talk about how to cope with labor. And so Susan had the idea in this coronavirus time to talk about family self-reliance. And she is the mother of 7 and a nurse and a very resourceful person. So I think this should be a very interesting talk. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Lynn.
All right.
Thanks
so
for
when
thanks
we
for doing this again.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this again. I think all of these conversations are very important.
I think so too. And when you mentioned to me a good topic would be family self-reliance or self-sufficiency. And I thought, wow, there's so much we could talk about, beginning with birth, newborn care, parenting, raising a family, just living life. There's so much to be said for being able to have your own resources to do many things rather than rely on others. And when we think way back in history, men and women knew how to do so many household, farm tasks, fixing their own car, their own equipment, they're cooking their own food, growing their own food, all kinds of things that people knew. And then as we became more modern, we have all these appliances that can do things for us. We make money, we pay people to do things for us, to the point where it's pretty scary that most of us could not live more than 5 or 6 days without having to go to a grocery store. Who grows food in their yard to feed their family on their property? Not many people. So it's pretty scary when you think of all the things we can't do. So maybe today you can share with us so many things that we can do or that we can learn to do. So it was your idea. So I'm sure that you have a lot of interesting things to suggest to our viewers today. And anybody out there who is watching right now live, please type in some comments. Maybe you're doing some things that we can learn from and that others can learn from. So we want to make this interactive. So we don't have anybody watching at the moment, but as people join, hopefully you can write in comments and just share with us some of the things that you're proud of or that you can help others. So where do you want to start?
Well, I guess I'm going to have to start when I was young. Okay. Because, we're all on a different path in life, and we're all, guided different ways. And when I was a kid, I saw other women, my mom's friends and, my family members, and I started learning from them. And that's kind of what you were talking about when in times past, people learned different skills than what we're learning now. And so I remember my mom had a friend who was, I believe she homeschooled her children, and she was always baking. She was always baking bread and different, nutritious meals. And there was just something about her and her kitchen and the things that she cooked and the way that she lived her life that appealed to me. And so I drew from her example, and that was something as a mother that I wanted to do, is I wanted to be able to prepare nutritious meals for my children. And so when I got married, we had to decide what kind of a life we wanted to live. We knew we wanted children. We talked maybe 3 or 4 children. We ended up having 7 children, which we didn't plan on. Not that they weren't planned, but in the beginning, when we first got married, we didn't set out to have a huge family.
Yeah.
We thought maybe 3, if we were going to have a 3rd, then probably a 4th. But so as times went on, then we ended up having more and more children. And we couldn't really afford them. It's very costly to have a large family. And so my husband was, reticent to add more children, but I felt strongly like we needed to have more children. And so we were in California and we were struggling, and my husband wanted us to move. We wanted to move somewhere where we could raise our children. We homeschooled them. That was something that came also from when I was a young woman. Like I said, the woman who cooked, and I believe she homeschooled. I had also, when I was like 19, I did some tracting, getting political signatures. And I went to this one house, and the woman opened her door, and all these kids came running, and they were in swimsuits, and it was the middle of the day, and they were homeschooled. And I just thought that was really cool. There was just something about that appealed to me. And so that was another example of something that guided me in my choices. So we were homeschooling our children and trying to figure out how to make it work, make life work, because California is very expensive. And my husband had listened to Dave Ramsey. Mm-hmm. And Dave Ramsey had said something that really caught our attention. He said, if you want to live like no other, then you have to be willing to live like no other. And so we had a large family. We had 5 children then. So we were living in a way that many people don't do these days. Many people don't have large families. And we were trying to figure out how to make it easier, because I was a stay-at-home mom. That was something that was important to us. He worked. And we were struggling. We had always struggled financially. And we wanted to live somewhere where our children could have land to play on. We were living in a townhouse at the time. And every time the children would go out into the yard, we would get a fine. So if children stepped foot on the grass, we would get a fine. Yes.
Was it homeowners association or what? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And we would get a $25 fine if the children were seen on the grass. And of course, there was somebody who sat there with their binoculars to see when somebody stepped on the grass. Wow. If our dog got out, we would get a fine. If I parked too long by the garage, we would get a fine.
Wow.
So we needed to move somewhere where we could have a house and have a little bit of property. We wanted to we were beginning to want to be self-reliant, have chickens. And I had always gardened, had a small garden. My mom had gardened when I was young. And so that was something that was meaningful to me. And we were just trying to get somewhere affordable where we could have room for our kids to run and for us to be able to have some larger gardens and to have maybe chickens. Although you can have chickens even in small areas. Mm-hmm. So I do have to say that I have friends in California who do have chickens in their backyard. Raising chickens in your backyard has become more common these days. But at the time, we were just wanting larger property. So we were struggling and trying to figure it out. And Dave Ramsey made a big impression on us. So at the time, we decided we needed to move our family and we needed to save money. And we weren't being able to save any money. We were barely making it. Okay. So my husband got the idea. Somebody he had worked with actually had told him that he had moved his family into a family member's garage. Mm-hmm. And they had lived in a garage for a year to save money. And they ended up saving enough money to start a business and ended up becoming wealthy after that. So that year sacrifice springboarded them off into a different kind of lifestyle.
Okay. And
so we got that idea, and that's what we did. We moved into a friend's garage. My husband is construction. He's a contractor. So we were able to, he divided it up into a living room and a bedroom. And so we had to make some really big sacrifices with 5 children at the time.
Yeah, wow.
And we moved in there. We didn't stay there for a whole year. We saved up money. We bought a motor home. Towards, I think, the last couple months, we moved to another place and we stayed in a mobile home. No, a motor home. Not the motor home that we owned. We stayed in another larger motor home for about 3 months and saved. We were able to save $10,000, I think $12,000 in a year.
Yeah.
Which helped us to move to Missouri, where we bought property. Okay. And so we came to Missouri, and what we moved to was 2 acres with a cabin with no running water and no electricity.
Wow.
And that we moved there in the winter, and it was freezing. And my husband put in a wood stove, and we slept around the wood stove because it was too cold in the 2 rooms that he'd made for the kids. There wasn't enough heat in there. So we slept around the wood stove, and my husband stayed in the motorhome, and we hauled water in. We had an extension cord that ran to another property that was 500 feet away. So we did have a little bit of electricity, but it was so little that you couldn't run a heater. You couldn't run the burner to cook your meal, and have, like, the lights would dim. So you couldn't run 2 things at once. Otherwise it would be a dim amount of power. Okay. And we did that for a few months while my husband worked on a house that we had found to buy. It was a house on 10 acres, and it was a fixer-upper, complete fixer-upper. And so he was working on the house while we were staying in the cabin and hauling wood, and hauling water. And we had a composting toilet, and I put in a beautiful, amazing garden. And it was stressful, but the kids had the best time. They have the best memories of that time. They loved it. They were outside a lot. We were gardening often. We bought our daughter a horse. We had a horse on that property. It was just an amazing time and a completely different lifestyle than what we were living in Los Angeles.
Definitely.
We loved our lifestyle in Los Angeles. We went to the beach often. We played sports. We did, there was school. We did homeschool there, and they had charter schools that purchased our materials and let us have a great schooling system for the kids, and it gave them a great lifestyle and great schooling. Missouri was a complete.
Did you and your husband grow up in California, and did you have relatives in the area?
Yes, all my family's in California.
So that was hard to leave. That was hard to leave.
It was hard to leave.
Phase in life. You were in a new phase and stage in life that required certain decisions for a certain lifestyle that you wanted. And one question: how close was your first house in Missouri to your current one? And I'm thinking of your husband must have got really tired. He's trying to work full time and make money, and trying to work on your property when he had time. And how far away were those homes?
Yeah, it was hard for him. He was he was trying to establish a business. We had a little cushion left over from that money. Before we left California, we went to Disneyland. We had a big trip. Spent about $1,200 taking the kids to Disneyland and out to eat and everything. And on the way, our trip to Missouri was fun. We went to museums. We made it a great time. We had a little bit of a cushion of a nest egg when we got there, but we also had some surprises. So he did need to work, and he was working on building his business. So it was hard on him, but he was working hard to make the house livable for us. And I was doing a lot of, like I said, schlepping wood, schlepping water. It was kind of, when we got to Missouri, a lot of people actually live the way I've kind of described, maybe not as severe as us, but one of my friends said that she didn't realize that Missouri was a third world country, because in the country, a lot of people haul wood and they haul water and raise their own food and have animals. There's the Amish community there. There's Mennonites. I made a friend who lived up the street from us. She grew her own food. She had animals. They drank raw milk. She made sourdough bread. She was just somebody that inspired me, and that I was amazed at how much she was able to accomplish and do on her own. And she was very self-sufficient and self-reliant. And so, so he was working very hard. And then we were able to move into our house, which had a well, but then the well ran dry. So we were back to hauling water. And the way it worked was, in town, there was a like a water station where you could go and fill up a huge container that you would put on the back of your truck, and then you could take it home. And some people have underground water reservoirs, and they fill that, and then they have like pumps that would pump water into their home, because not everybody has access to city water. So, you know, that was all new and a huge learning experience for us, and it did make life, you know, challenging. It was very hard for me. I was stressed quite a bit of the time, but the kids loved it. We would go on long walks and we played outside. And so the time that we had then kind of reminds me of what we're experiencing now.
Yeah.
And our lives have kind of changed from then. And we haven't been doing a lot of the self-reliant things that we had wanted to do when we first moved here, because the recession came. And shortly after we moved here, the recession happened, and we ended up having to let go of our house and moving to a larger city. We were in the country, in a small town with like 2,000 people. So we had to move to the city where there's 70,000 people, to a different house that's on 2 acres. And we had to, you know, I had to work 3 jobs. He was out of work for a while. Just things changed. We were in survival mode. And then I went to school. When our youngest went into kindergarten, I decided to become a nurse. I went to school. I graduated. I've been a nurse for 3 years. And we have been wanting to get back to having chickens and gardening and all of these self-reliant principles that we aspire to, but it just wasn't the season for it. And so with COVID, I'm finding that a lot of people have this, you know, redirection in life, where we're realizing that maybe we should make some changes, maybe we should get back to basics. And for us, it's a perfect time. It's been a perfect time where the children have been home. We don't homeschool anymore. We put them in public school. But now they're home, and we have all this child labor. And we have, my husband just built a chicken coop, and we've got chickens again for the first time in 10 years.
Wow.
We are working on putting in a garden. He was actually just asking me, I thought you were going to garden with me today. I said, yes, I will when I'm done with this. We have to start from scratch and put a garden in, and that's a lot of work. I started baking bread. The children have been baking bread with me, and we're just, you know, getting back to what we aspire to. And I find that a lot of people are doing that. We've had this moment where we realize how dependent we are on, you know, for everything, for even a loaf of bread, and that can be taken away immediately. And the stores may not have what we need, and we need to learn and have those skills to be able to do that.
We do need, we might need those skills to survive. I thought to myself, what if the government controls food and gasoline? And I almost like don't want to say that, because that's a scary thought. They've controlled quite a bit now with everyone. The words I don't like to use, they use pandemic, quarantine, lockdown. To me, the word lockdown is something you use for an active shooter. You're on lockdown. Quarantine is a word, someone is severely ill and it's highly contagious. You put yourself in a bubble and you quarantine from even the air. And pandemic and all these, you know, scary words that are inciting fear. And I thought, wow, if they really wanted to control people, just stop our supply to gasoline so we couldn't get in our cars and drive anywhere. And, you know, food, just rationing out food. And so you're really on a level higher if you can provide for yourself. And I wanted to say, I've thought of friends in the past, or acquaintances, people I haven't met, but I've read their stories, newsletters in the 1990s and 2000. And they did homesteading, where they pretty much would even churn their butter and everything, almost off the grid completely. And it got so stressful and intensive that from morning till night, they were waking up doing everything related to the home. So tell me if you if you felt an exhaustion from trying to live the simple life might not be so simple sometimes. Yes, I've read a lot of books on that too. I forgot the author's name.
It was exhausting. I think I had a miscarriage at one time. I was hauling large amounts of water and the wood and, taking care of the kids. And so I think I might have had a miscarriage. But, what I really learned at that time was it's much easier to do these things when you have the income to supply that lifestyle.
Okay.
And so, many times people will sell their city home and then go to the country and they can get set up with everything that they need.
Yes.
And we, moved from a tough situation to a tough situation, a new situation. And we were trying to learn skills while surviving. And that was really challenging.
What a good point, because some of these authors were wealthy and they gave up their wealthy Wall Street hedge fund life or born into wealth. I don't want to mention any names. They were very popular books, and they had like a head start. It was almost like it was playtime, like a leisure. It was leisurely for them to go and homestead. And I think they're living there. They'd be in their late 60s, early 70s by now, some of the big authors that I'm thinking of. But what a good point that when you don't have much and you're trying to launch this kind of life is, especially with a large family. I just want to say hello to the people watching today. We have a few viewers. Allison Murphy says, I love you too. Don't have time to be here now with you, but I love what you are doing. Keep sharing your best selves with the world. And Jenny Hatch says, good morning. Tell me about Tuffer's home birth. She thinks that maybe sharing Tuffer's home birth would be a good topic.
Well, I won't share just about that just yet. But what I want to say is that, for me, I'm not coming on here to share because I've created this hugely successful, self-reliant life, but to share what I've been striving for and the challenges that we face and how we have recently, through these 10 years, we've been wanting to get back to where we were. And now it's just been a perfect time for us financially and with time, but also that extra bit of drive and motivation. And I see that happening with other people. Like I was just at work the other day and we were at the nurse's station and we were talking about gardening, and one of the ladies was sharing, she had actually brought some bread that she bakes and had shared it with our director, and which, touched my heart. And it's like, yes, it's so awesome when you can meet other people who are living the way that you desire to live. Yeah. And so she was a great example for me. And we were talking about gardening. She was talking about putting lavender and strawberries in her garden. And I remembered the other day, I was telling my husband, I had a book once that talked about different plants, different flowers that are compatible with different vegetables, and doing a kind of gardening where you're growing vegetables with flowers and herbs in a way that it helps to decrease the bugs and helps the plants to grow. Mm-hmm. And I need to get versed on that again. And so I was discussing it with this nurse, and then another nurse said, oh yeah, gardening, it's so healthy for you. And, we were talking about how there's this drive now to start growing your own food and the supply chain and the risk of not having the food that we need, and how important it is for us to start gardening again. And that woman said how it's also, healthy to be in the dirt and you're touching you get nutrients from the dirt, and how in times past, in the old days, people were healthier. The elders were healthier than our elders are, and she believed it was because they had spent so much time outside getting nutrients from the dirt that our bodies needed. And now when we become old, we're depleted, our systems are depleted, and how, there's just such benefits from it. Also, her son was studying something about energy and how you get energy also from touching the earth.
Yeah.
And then another woman was sharing her thoughts. And so it was just great that here we were all kind of on similar wavelengths of being inspired to do more for ourselves and to go back to basics and try to start, learning these skills that we've lost and sharing it with each other. And I was really enjoying that moment.
And I want to say that it can sound overwhelming, but you can learn one skill at a time. A 4x4 garden with 2 or 3. Just start with one plant in your windowsill. Sewing, whatever. You should go with your interests, not with what you feel you should do. Go with your interests and just imagine. And the husband and wife have to be in line too. Because I said to my husband years ago, I really long for a simple life. I would maybe one day like a tiny home, maybe on 5 acres of land with a few tiny homes. So when our adult kids visited, maybe with grandchildren, they could be in their tiny home on our property. We'd have a central gazebo or whatever. But he doesn't desire a tiny home. And at this stage in my life, I'm glad that we did buy a large home so that when everybody comes visit, we have space for them. And in these times, 4 of us live in the house. It's about 2,300 square feet. And so it's very spacious, for all of us. And, so just one thought is do one thing at a time. What can you do within your 4 walls? What can you do even in a modern lifestyle that would be a little more self-reliant, just one thing. And hopefully people are taking time during this coronavirus to actually learn a few skills, do new things. A lot of people talk that they're watching movies, they're kind of waiting, they're hanging out at home. And I'm like, wow, you can this is opportunity to get productive and to learn things and to serve others and do many things. And the other one thing I wanted to also say, you have to be countercultural. To everything is modern. Give me the bigger and faster cell phone, iPhones. This one has 2 cameras on it. It has a lot more than I need, but it's what I have, and I'm not relying on it. I use the tool, but I'm not going to become dependent on it. So, anyways.
Well, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. You have to be willing to live a different kind of lifestyle. And I mentioned the other day about Tasha Tudor. She was an illustrator. She was an artist. She illustrated children's books. I believe she wrote her own books. And she set herself up. She bought a farm and set herself up with this vintage lifestyle, a Victorian lifestyle. She wore Victorian clothes, or not even Victorian, like more of like a farmer, peasant type of plain, simple clothing, homespun, with homespun shawls. And she drew and she cooked and she gardened, and she didn't conform to society and to society's fashion. And she was willing to live like no other so she could live like no other. And she had this amazing, life that she created for herself. And she inspires me. And, we have to look to other people. It's so important to have conversations with people. That's why I love what you're doing, because, going over and visiting with somebody, so much nowadays, we're all, in our homes and on our electronics. You don't see people out and about as much as you used to. That's why this quarantine has actually been really nice. We're actually seeing more people out and walking around than normal, because that's really all you can do is go out and go for walks and enjoy the outdoors. But unfortunately, it has limited us from visiting each other. But going out and visiting other people is so important. I remember I went, and that's how I met my Mennonite friend. And I had gone over to her home. She invited us for dinner, and she inspired me and my children. I also have, I was a doula for a family, and I had gone to their home. I had the fortune to go to their home, and she had lettuce growing on her porch in containers that her mom had given her. And I was so inspired by that. I was telling my husband, we need to get some lettuce growing on our porch. That's so simple. So what you were saying about starting small, you know, start growing vegetables right on your porch. We put in a couple flower beds right off of our porch, and we're going to put tomatoes in there. And so, you know, instead of just putting in flowers, we're going to put in tomatoes also. And so you don't have to do, you know, huge gardening, but you can start off doing small. You could start making some bread. You can start saving food. Like we had the last couple of years, the last 4 years, my husband had felt that it was, we used to store food many years ago. I always wanted to have a backup of canned foods and grain and different things and water. And then we moved, and in the moves that we made, we had lost a lot of that. So he started putting away some canned foods about 4 years ago and building up those stores, which has been helpful for us at this time. And we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And our church, for well over 100 years, has been encouraging its members to have food storage, 72-hour kit,
like 3 months.
Yeah, 3 months, a month, 3 months, a year. They actually encourage us to have a year's supply of food, as much as you are able to have. And so we've always aspired to follow that teaching. But it is challenging, and you have to rotate your food. But, you know, you can start small and have some food and have some toilet paper saved up. And this just really shows people that you could be caught off guard and have nothing.
Definitely.
So, you know, having backyard chickens, most places you can have backyard chickens. You just can't have roosters. So another part of being self-reliant for us has been, I mentioned the homeschooling, but also home birthing and breastfeeding. And, you know, these times like this really confirm how important those principles are: breastfeeding and baby wearing. And because, like, there's been big events that have struck me that what I'm doing is correct and that I'm making good choices and this is what I should be doing, such as Y2K came about and there was a big scare there. Then we had Katrina, and, you know, we've just had different events that have happened that I've learned from. During Katrina, I remember seeing a woman, she was sharing her story. I'm pretty sure it was during Katrina. They were flooded. There was was it a hurricane? Hurricane Katrina. Yeah. Hurricane. They were lost. Hurricane Katrina. So they were, I think they were on the shore when it happened, and the wave came and swept her and her 2 children away. And she was holding one child, and the other one was swept away, and she couldn't grab the other one without letting go of the one she had. And she had to see her older child disappear in the water. And that was heartbreaking. And I realized there had been some, you know, other things I had seen on the internet and some of the groups I was involved in about the importance of baby wearing. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, if that mom had been wearing her child in a sling,
she could have saved
then
it.
her hands would have been free, and she could have maybe grabbed him. That's pure speculation. I'm not blaming her or saying, you know, anything, but it made me think that simple, that just very basic practice of wearing your baby can be life-saving. And so at that same time, there was, in another part of the world, like in India, there was a group that was supplying slings to women in India because they had a natural disaster there also. And babies and moms were in jeopardy there. And so they were supplying them. And so there were some people wanting to supply people in Katrina in the after, not only during the hurricane, but after the hurricane, when people were displaced, they needed slings to carry their babies. And so just using a simple sheet can be used to make a sling, to make a wrap, to carry your baby with you.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's just a basic skill that so many women didn't know. Fortunately, it's more common now.
Yeah.
We did a lot of work. There was, 10, 15 years ago, I don't remember how long Katrina was, but the efforts that we made in teaching people about baby wearing has made it so it's more common now.
You do see it more often. You definitely see it more often.
But even still, but how many times do we think of, oh, in our 72-hour kit, we need to have a sling, or, in our car, we should have a sling. We should have one with us at all times. I used a sling whenever I left the home and I would take my children anywhere. Instead of carrying them in a car seat, I would put them in the baby sling and take them to the store or church. It facilitates breastfeeding. So also with baby wearing is breastfeeding. You can have food right then, immediately. You don't need formula. And, so many people say, well, there's women who can't breastfeed and they need formula. And that is true. There are some women who cannot breastfeed, but you and I have the belief that if you want to have a natural birth, that you need to follow an example of what natural birth is, and that is hard to achieve in a hospital. It's hard to get a natural birth in a hospital. You really have to know your stuff. You have to educate yourself, and you have to advocate yourself.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with breastfeeding. If you want to breastfeed, you can't follow the practices and the lifestyle of a formula feeding society.
Yeah.
And that's what we live in. We live in a formula feeding society, and many times we've lost that skill of how to breastfeed. And so for me, when I breastfed for 17 years. I have 7 children. They all breastfed for about 2.5 years. One breastfed for 18 months and one went for almost 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I did not use a pacifier. I know that there are some studies that show that using a pacifier is actually beneficial, but I chose not to use a pacifier. I chose ecological. It's called ecological breastfeeding. Yeah. I breastfed exclusively and on demand. Yeah. And I was able to breastfeed all my children. And I'm not saying that there aren't women who have issues. Some do. My grandmother, she tried to breastfeed and wasn't able to. And so her sister breastfed her children for her.
Nice.
And so, yes, there are women who are not able to. But I think that if we followed if we were to practice, immediate attachment after birth, mm-hmm. and having a medicated birth can interfere with breastfeeding because the baby can be born with the effects of medication that can interfere with their breastfeeding and their latching. If we have the support immediately after, where we can have skin-to-skin contact right after birth, mm-hmm. and mothers are supported and mothering is funded so that women can stay home and have exclusive time with their children to breastfeed them. And, I work with lots of nurses who manage to work and breastfeed, and I commend them. I didn't ever have to pump. I chose not to pump. I chose to exclusively breastfeed. But I see women pumping and working and breastfeeding, and I think that's remarkable. And they are able to do that. They're able to give their children a bottle and also to breastfeed. So it is possible. So it's not to say that we can't work or that we can't bottle feed, but you shouldn't introduce a bottle for a certain time frame in the beginning until breastfeeding is established, yep. And then you can introduce a bottle.
And a couple things I want to say: that you can save a lot of money. That breastfeeding probably can save you $600 to $1,000 or more. I don't know how much formula costs nowadays, but it can easily add up to almost $1,000. And one thing about ecological breastfeeding, what many women don't know is is that it's not such a great thing to have a nursery where you put the baby in its own room away from the parents. You're not going to hear the baby's cues for breastfeeding. So you can do co-sleeping, research it. You're not going to roll over and suffocate the baby. But my husband and I, we got a king size bed, plenty of room for one baby there for your space. And ecological breastfeeding means being available pretty much 24/7 for your baby, for their cues. It doesn't mean, okay, I need a break, let me put the baby in another room. Because then, and a good thing also is if you do ecological breastfeeding, you in general, it provides child spacing of about 2.5 years. And what that does for the mother is she's not overwhelmed by having a baby after 10 months, after 15 months. I mean, having 4 kids under the age of 4, they didn't do ecological breastfeeding, and maybe they didn't do much breastfeeding at all. But this builds in. So I hope that parents are not so selfish as to say, I want one boy and one girl 1 year apart, and then I'm done. Okay, well, that's maybe not be the best for the child, and it's probably not the best for the mom. Oh, I want my kids to be only a year apart so they can be friends. And that's another fallacy. You can have kids. So ecological breastfeeding, one of my friends, Martha Pugas, said that the average mom, if she gets married in her early 20s and she lets nature take her course, she could have about 7 children, about 2.5 years apart, ecological breastfeeding, and it won't exhaust you as much as what you think you might want to plan. So ecological breastfeeding covers a little bit. Oh, I just want to say with my daughter Millicent, I went 36 months without a period. I couldn't believe that. Okay, so for 40 weeks, you're pregnant, you give birth, and she was almost 2 years old till I started menstruating again. And that was, I don't think I've ever met any woman who went like 3 years, give or take. And that was phenomenal. So then with my 6th child, I expected the same thing, and that didn't happen. I think my body returned. Maybe he was 8 or 10 months old. I don't remember, but I couldn't believe how, and that gave my body and my fertility a rest. And, I'm 57 and I'm still haven't gone through menopause. I'm still perimenopause.
Really?
I believe that. So I looked up the Guinness Book of World Records, and I think the oldest woman was 62 or 63. So I'm definitely on the high
end. Are you sure you haven't gone through menopause? Because I thought I was in menopause. I didn't really think I had been through menopause because I was still spotting. I was still having some periods. Mm-hmm. And I went with my new job as a nurse. I went to establish myself with an obstetrician, and I told her that I was in menopause, that I was having periods now and then. Well, she said, let's get you tested, get your hormones checked out, because if you are in menopause, then that's normal. But if you're already postmenopausal, then the bleeding you're describing is abnormal and could be a problem.
Yeah.
So we had my hormones checked, and it came back that I was postmenopausal.
Okay. Wow.
And that is problematic. And so I had a DNC done. Well, I had a biopsy and then a DNC. And there were precancerous cells that were found. So the spotting that I was having was an indication that there was something wrong. So it is important to find out if you are menopausal or not. And I didn't ever have hot flashes. I had some like breast pain. I had some things that made me think I was in menopause, but I didn't realize I was postmenopausal.
Yeah.
But
and that brings up another topic too. You can be self-reliant when it comes to medical stuff. And there's Google, there's essential oils, there's herbs, there's so many things at health food stores. So there's so much that you can do for your own health, your dental health, and your physical health, that you don't need a doctor or somebody else to tell you. And it's so fascinating to learn about yourself, about the body, and to try to treat yourself. And
you said something previously. We all have to decide what is the right number of children for ourselves. We all can be guided to, different lifestyles and different sized families. But I think many times we are governed by society. And I would have never thought I was going to have 7 children when I first started out. But as I had children, I just had this spiritual feeling like I was supposed to have more. And so, for us, it wasn't anything we had planned on. My name is Susan. I'm named after my grandmother, whose name is Susan, and she had 7 children. And I never aspired to follow in her footsteps. Yeah. But I did end up having 7 children. And so, it's not for me to look at somebody else and say, you should or shouldn't have this many children. We all have to go along with what we feel we're meant to do. But so along those lines, I felt that we were supposed to have those children, and I was supposed to breastfeed them. And I had people come into my life that supported the promptings that I was getting as far as family size and breastfeeding. And I did do ecological breastfeeding. I didn't have a period for 2 years. So almost 2 years. I think it was more like my children are exactly 2 years apart. So it was probably about 14 months or at least a year where I didn't have a return of my cycle.
Yeah.
And so we co-slept. Not everybody can or wants to co-sleep. There's a lot of, that's a big debate on whether we should be co-sleeping or not. I practiced co-sleeping. I found with my first child, I was sitting up in the rocker with her, breastfeeding her, putting her to sleep, and then putting her in the bassinet, because that's what we're told we need to do. That's what a good parent does, is put their baby in a bassinet. And then I went into my bed and laid there and worried about her. Was she breathing? And it was cold. And so I would get up in the middle of the night to get her out of the bassinet, to sit in the rocking chair and sleep with her. To breastfeed her. And I was finding myself nodding off in the rocking chair, because when you breastfeed, it increases oxytocin, increases hormones that relax you and cause you not only to be bonded with your child, but causes you to go to sleep. Yeah. And I realized, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm putting her in danger by rocking her in this chair and nodding off with her. I should just put her to bed with me. And I slept better. She breastfed easily. It worked out for us. It went against what we're taught. We're taught to put your child in a crib or a bassinet. And then when I became pregnant, the doctor told me, you need to stop breastfeeding because you can't be pregnant and breastfeed. And so I did stop breastfeeding her. Well, with my next pregnancy, I did not stop breastfeeding. I felt like women in times past, they didn't stop breastfeeding. Why do I need to stop breastfeeding? And I breastfed all of my future children during my pregnancies. I didn't stop breastfeeding because I was pregnant, and I didn't have issues because of that. I just made sure I ate more food and drank more water so that I could continue to have breast milk. And there were times where maybe my level of breast milk production went down, but then it would come back up again. So yes, ecological breastfeeding, if it's done exclusively without pacifiers, with co-sleeping, with baby wearing and attachment, you can have your cycle not come back for a year, and that can help with child spacing. But that doesn't mean it works perfectly for everybody. There's, people always want to say, well, they didn't work for me. Well, of course, there's going to be those outliers. There's going to be people where it doesn't work perfectly for everybody. But for many people, you can delay your cycle and you can space out your children. So my children were every 2 years until the 5th child. Then we were a little more reluctant, so we had them 3 and 4 years apart. Yeah. And so we also did decide to home birth. That saved us money. it wasn't really about the money, but it ended up being a benefit for us that we saved money having our children at home. So that was, something that is different. Not everybody wants to do it, but it's a skill. There's so much that needs to be learned, and there's a skill to learning about natural childbirth, how to achieve natural childbirth. And that's why these discussions are so important, because it's good to read. We all need to read, but it's different being able to talk to somebody, finding another woman in your town or through the internet that you can have real life discussions with and learn from and bounce ideas from. It's so important. And, with home birth, when I was studying it, I felt like this is a self-reliance issue. I felt strongly that women needed to learn about home birth, not just home birth, but natural childbirth, because there might be a time when you can't go to the hospital to give birth, or if you are planning to go to the hospital and en route you deliver, preemptively before you get there, or if there's, so there's been different with 9/11. When 9/11 happened, there were some women who gave birth out of the hospital who were planning to go to the hospital because of the terrorist attack. Right. So even recently with the fires in Australia, there was a picture of a woman walking and there was fires in the background, and she was breastfeeding her baby. And that just confirmed to me again the importance of breastfeeding, of these skills. I consider them, womanly art skills that we have lost, and we need to give them back. And breastfeeding, it doesn't come naturally for everybody. It is a skill. It is a learned thing. You have to learn about it. It just doesn't happen for everyone. Sometimes you have problems. That's why we have lactation consultants.
Yeah. Well, what I want to say also is the breastfeeding is comforting to the child and to the mother. And I just had a very nice thought as you were talking. When we do these self-reliant or self-sufficient things, or these more natural, earthy things, the other children learn. It's not a mystery. So I did natural family planning for most of my life. And, some of my daughters saw the charts sitting out. Oh, Mom, what's that? What is natural family planning? So in our home, they learned about sexuality, home birthing, homeschooling, and we talked about everything, and they lived it to the point where they don't need to go to the public school and learn sexuality that they're going to be taught in a more cultural way. And so when I was breastfeeding Millicent, my oldest son, Rob, was about 8 years old. And in the early evenings, in the later evenings, and he homeschooled, we had so many conversations. The rest of the kids maybe went to bed. And so for 30 or 40 minutes, I had such a nice relationship with my firstborn. We had so many good conversations because I had to sit still and nurse the baby and don't do anything else and don't be distracted. So it was built-in conversation time. And so I think of, by choice, other moms who are maybe working, rushing, bottle feeding. They lose those opportunities for intimacy, intimate opportunities of conversation with other family members. So it brings you together as a family unit. So, and you don't, at first you said it costs a lot of money to raise a child. And it's like, well, our family we didn't do all the music lessons and the gymboree and the whatever yuppie expensive things that people do. We did things in the home, and they were very simple, but they were fun. My kids, when we lived in South Carolina, we had a house facing the woods. They would go out and play for a few hours. Nowadays parents worry and they have to keep track of their kids, but they had freedom of the land to go and explore. And it just, it's my vision of a better childhood that they get to explore and learn.
I think we have to decide, what kind of lifestyle do we want to live? And then we need to be willing to make sacrifices for that. In order for us to have our children, we made huge sacrifices. Right. And the downside is we do have some debt because I was a stay-at-home mom and my husband's business, he struggled being self-employed. We do have debt. We're trying to get out of that debt now. I wish we had been more forward thinking when we were younger and bought a house right off the bat. So many young people nowadays want to save their money so they can buy not just a little house, but a big house, mm-hmm. and have a certain kind of lifestyle before they start having children. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, because I wouldn't want to judge anybody else on their choice, but I feel like if we can get back, get away from what other people think of us, that so much of what drives us is wanting to get the big house in the right part, in the right area. Yes, you want a safe area and all those things, but so many times we just, we're driven by wanting to measure up to society's ideal. Mm-hmm. And if we are brave enough to get away from that and want to have a family and get our pleasures from family life, that's what this COVID has kind of helped, I think, some of us see. Yeah. That staying at home and being here with our family and, returning back to basics, there is a pleasure and there is a satisfaction that comes out of that. And if you're willing to, to not go along with what everyone else is doing and you break away from that, you can have a very fulfilling and, wonderful life that you create for yourself. Yeah. And it's great for us to be able to connect with other people, like-minded people who want some of the same things.
Yeah. Great. Very well said. Well, we've run out of time, and it's been a delight talking with you. I loved how you share all your ideas, and on your Facebook page, I like watching the progress of what you're doing with your land. It's coming along well, and it's hard work that you're putting into it, but gosh, it's looking good, and I know you have visions for even more. So thank you, and the hard work that you do also.
Thanks for your time, Lynn. Like I said, I appreciated these conversations. It's just so cool to be, that I feel like this is the stuff that matters. There's so much that we can listen to on the internet, but the conversations that you've been having are, very meaningful. And I hope that more people will start conversing about these types of things and sharing them. And this is a great avenue for doing this technology, this StreamYard, if that's what you're using,
yeah,
where we can see each other at the same time. What I really wish was that there was, I guess we could Zoom. I don't know. I'd love to have a conversation with more people, like with Sheila and Jenny.
With StreamYard, I can do up to 3 people, and with Zoom, you can do more. You can do more with Zoom. So,
because there have been so many of your conversations that, I've had thoughts that I would love to pipe in and share and get everybody, we really need to have a larger conversation with more people so we can kind of, springboard off each other. And
okay, well, how about this? I'll look into maybe like a panel discussion, and maybe up to 3 or 4 people total. I could moderate like a panel discussion on a topic. But I don't think StreamYard. I'd have to pick Zoom. I'd have to pick something else. But I'll look into that. I want to apologize also to the viewers. Susan's picture is a little blurry, and I don't know what that's about. Internet connection, or we get what we get.
We don't know why.
Your audio has been excellent, but your visual has been a little blurry. So I apologize. There's nothing I can do about it. And thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye.